check the Fox author. Are there any specific procedural assets you want to add in the future? Yes, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of procedural assets, like just generally like kind of like gonna expand, add like, more primitives, more kind of common things. I wanna add like more procedural texture, sounds, like lots of different kinds. It also kind of depends what kind of procedural asset you mean in general, because there's a lot of things that are technically procedural assets, even though you might not even like realize that. For example, the UI. The way UIX works, it actually generates procedural meshes that are for the like actual UI, and then it's like rendered out with like the typical mesh render that exists as a local slot that you cannot see. But under the hood, like there's a bunch of procedural asset providers, they're sort of orchestrated by the canvas component. So there's things like that are also procedural assets. One of the examples, where you might have such a system, which is actually using procedural assets behind the hood, but they might not be, direct procedural asset components that you can use directly, is something like metaballs. Because metaballs, it's not like a single thing. Like usually you don't have just a single metaball. It's one mesh that you generate from multiple things, and you can have like, variable number of them, where you have like, things that cannot generate fields. So it'll be an example of like, one where technically it's also procedural asset, but you might not be, it's not like, single procedural component asset that you use. It's like, more like a subsystem that's using those, for more complex functionality. Even something, like once we have like vertex mesh editing, that's actually gonna use, procedural assets in the background too. But yeah, like I don't have like any, like, there's a lot of like just small ones. Like one off the top of my head is also like a hemisphere, essentially like, half of a sphere. Oh, actually, there's one. There's one thing I really want to add that's going to be a useful building block for lots of procedural assets. Right now, we are missing implementation of method for like triangulation of arbitrary, arbitrary kind of like, what's the word? Essentially arbitrary kind of like, kind of curves. Let me grab a brush so I can just draw it quick. We're not going to be moving to the board yet, but I'll make a quick sketch. I should have bought my brush at the beginning. There it is. It's my favorite brush. I should just save it to the root of my inventory. So like right now, like for example, if you have something like this that is convex, say like you have like this loop of vertices and you want to fill this, we do have like a method that's able to do like triangulation, that uses like a triangle fan, for example. So it starts here and just does like view, view, view. Oh, that's pretty much it. And it kind of fills this with triangles. Problem is, what happens, if you have like more complex shape that's not convex, but it's concave. So like you have something like this, and it goes inside, and it goes back here. So like you have something like view, 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 view. So now if you did the triangle fan, this would actually break, because if you started here and you did like, vjoop, 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 now you have like, triangle covering this area that's supposed to be empty. So typically, you have to use like some algorithm, say for example like ear clipping or some other algorithm that's like, a bit smarter about this, where essentially you give it this set of points, and it figures out, okay, like maybe I'll put triangle here, I'll put another here, and another here. And this kind of covers this shape of triangles. Once we have that algorithm, that's going to open up option for a lot more procedural meshes, because now, this building block can be used for lots of different things. And one of the cool things I want to add is 3D text. Because if you think about 3D text, the way fonts work is essentially they're sort of like outlines. They're like, like say for example the letter T. So the letter T, that might be literally just, an outline like this. So this is specified by, by the font file. You get like, this line, and then we can feed it to the algorithm that does triangulation. It figures out, how to do these. I don't even know if I'm doing it right, but like, it figures out like how to kind of fill this out. And now, now we can also, like, for example, extrude it, so we can, like, make it 3D. This is, like, the simpler part. And make this, like, like a thick T. And we can make this, a procedural mesh. You just type whatever text you want, you give whatever font you want, and you get that letter as a, 3D object in here. Plus, whole kinds of other stuff. Like, for example, we could, like, add, like, Bezier curves. So you can, like, define, some kind of, like, shapes. And then, like, something that kind of triangulates it and fills it out. So, like, that's going to open up a lot of options. And it's, like, one of the, like, relatively small things. But it's, like, one that I think is going to open up a lot of options. And I was just really wanted to do it for a while and didn't get to it. I have it on my list of my kind of fun issues. There's also another one. I do want to add also another algorithm that's kind of building block for a lot of these, called marching cubes, and essentially lets you reconstruct like a mesh surface for some kind of like field, and it's actually used for implementing metaballs, because metaballs, the way they work, you have like objects that kind of create like a field around them. And in order to make it into a mesh, you actually feed it into like marching cubes, and that is what gives you the final mesh from that. But it's used for all the other stuff too. One example is with the particle system, because with particles we could make like each particle be like almost like a little metaball, and then instead of those being rendered individually, we feed it to that algorithm for the marching cubes algorithm. And we generate, like if we get like a bunch of particles here, it's gonna create like, this kind of blob. Like they're gonna blobify. There's like another one is gonna be like this, and if there's like, two that are near each other, maybe, they'll be like this. And what that can be used for is, just making it look a little bit like liquid. For example, if you've played Portal, specifically Portal 2, they have the liquid gels, and this is one way you can do it. We're just shooting particles, and instead of rendering them as each individual, like, billboards or meshes, you have them, where kind of sort of goop together. So those are some of the things that I would like to add, because I think that's going to open up like a lot of really cool effects. Plus, once the algorithm's in there, it can be used for lots of things. Like, say with the marching cubes, like once we have terrain system, that's probably going to be one of the building blocks you can use to make terrains, because it's also oftentimes used for, destructive terrains, like where the terrain is defined by some kind of field, and like you kind of like use marching cubes to construct a mesh. So hopefully that kind of answers the question.